thank you for jumping on. There's so much that we can get into.
I'm
Uh,
ready.
so, so thanks for jumping on the Super Life train.
Aw, thank you for having me. I'm really honored to be here.
Yeah, stoked. Me too. Well, I think that this is number one. I'm going to learn a lot because obviously I'm a male. But I want to dive into that too
Hmm.
because from a hormone perspective, it just seems that from my humble point of view of the things that I've looked into, there's like this modern day hijacking that has led us down all kinds of uh, m- almost master gland debacle in a certain sense. And then we're running into, you're probably your profession in particularly is so important for almost the fabric of humanity. And still, I think the misinformation, the oversimplification, the not understanding, and I know you combat this all the time, every day. And so hopefully we'll dispel a little bit of that and unpack it just enough for people to understand.
I love it, Darren. You hit on so much, and I think one thing I could add to your what you just said is that it's all wrapped up in vulnerability and shame,
Mm.
fertility, reproductive health. And so if it's something that you already feel uncomfortable talking about, sometimes it's hard to get the funding to research.
Yeah.
So we still have a lot to learn.
Yeah.
But that's one of the most important things and how much I appreciate your having me on to at least have this discussion and open the doors to more learning.
Yeah, I mean, just that alone, the shame around it. Think about again, this is not meant to sound dramatic, but you can make the evolutionary argument that the one thing we are meant to do is to move the population forward. You can make the argument that the whole biological and construction of us being on this planet is to progress our legacy forward, and at the same time, we're seeing threat more than ever in this area. So around that, let's just jump into that kind of shame cycle that so easily, and I'm sure so almost silently, and in a kind of cylinder of someone uh, having a hard time, both male and female, because male
Absolutely.
statistics are alarming
Yes.
as well. But it always seems to, and I want to get your point of view on this, it always seems to point to the woman
Hmm.
because obviously the womb of creation is happening in her. So the focus is so much on her, and rightly so in many areas. But at the same time, it's a male issue, it's a societal issue, it's a modern day issue. Um, so I guess I don't even know how to begin this conversation because I guess what's your main objective right now? And then we can pull apart many different aspects of that. What is your
Yeah.
main mission right now?
Absolutely. I think education and just bringing to light how what we were taught in middle school and high school health class is just absolutely not reality. We were taught to fear getting pregnant before we were ready without
Mm.
all the other education that comes after that. And contraception works really, really well. You can really control your fertility when you are not trying to get pregnant. But when you are ready and you stop contraception, and when it doesn't work as quickly as you thought it was going to, then it turns into this shame cycle. And the woman really does carry that burden because of society and what we've seen in movies and education. And, that anything that has to do with family building and it's not working has definitely got to be the woman's fault. I mean, if King Henry VIII realized that it was sperm that decided male versus female offspring, he'd have maybe not as many wives, you know? And right? And it is interesting because in so much of medicine, women have gotten such a backseat. You know, it's difficult to study women. They might get pregnant, so keep them out of studies. You know, into the
Mhm.
1990s, we weren't even required to include women in, you know, medical trials. But in my field, men actually need a seat at the table. It's not always the woman's fault. Up to
Mhm.
50% of the time, it is men. And we've got to understand epigenetics and the importance of sperm and just how much our environment and reproductive health and what we're doing and all you talk about every single day is absolutely reflected in our fertility. And I think
Mhm.
that my field is something that can crack this open
Mhm.
because it's an immediate understanding, you know, reproduction, egg quality, sperm quality, and you can kind of see how all the things that you talk about in your books and on your podcasts and everything that you do can people can see the benefits quickly as they're trying to conceive. So I think we're up for a really incredible discussion.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think? What do you think from your expert vantage point? What do you think the biggest contributor or contributors are to overall infertility right now?
Oh my goodness. Well, everybody will say it's our fault because we're waiting too long to get pregnant.
Mhm.
So that's what you'll see in the newspapers and like the fertility decline and the fertility crisis in industrial nations around the world that it's that people are having less kids and they're waiting too long and then it's harder to get pregnant and
Mhm.
you know tech like IVF doesn't always overcome the
Mhm.
power of age and our eggs and sperm do not work as well as we get older. Like that is a fact. But
Mhm.
there's other dramatic things that don't make it that easy. You know, it feels comfortable to blame that because that's a choice that someone could make. Oh, I'm delaying my childbearing, therefore, okay, it's my fault. But I really do think a lot about the products that are in our home, the air quality, our water, our stressful lives, our lack of sleep. It is just all culminating into impacting our overall health, of course, but it's just showing up immediately in our reproductive health.
Well, it's that whole thing, like I've always set out to, the first part of my career was running around the planet trying to find, kind of old traditional elixirs or foods or botanicals that have been used for thousands of years, whether it was Ayurveda or traditional Chinese medicine or something. And it's easy to get into reductionism as well, even in that space, and certainly in the traditional pharmaceutical space. But I was like, that doesn't make sense.
Mm.
And certainly when you haven't dealt with foundational kind of pillars of health, whether
Hmm.
that's, just moving your body and uh, getting proper hydration and sleep and managing stress. And we've gotten so good at this is what life is, and next thing you know, you said something really important, and that is, I'm glad you said it, and like the epidemiological look at this stuff and the expressions of everything. So it's almost like the infertility is this major litmus of our society right now. And it should be, God, it should be talked about
Yeah.
so much more prevalently than what it is, and certainly from an intelligent, common sense standpoint and also scientific standpoint. Um, because, and that's a trick. Like, what do you find? Because, yes, you want to sprint towards IVF. You want to sprint towards kind of pharmaceutical based. I want to control this and control that. And then I'm going to select my sperm. It's a weird, I don't even know because I'm not in it, but I don't even know the extent at
Yeah.
what's going on right now. And at the same time, we want to find these answers
Yeah.
and missing this foundational thing that actually supports us more than anything else, and that's what we're doing every day.
Yeah.
And from your perspective, what are those blaringly obvious, do you think, are the top few things that
Yeah.
are contributing?
Well, I mean, one thing that you said that just really lit off a light bulb is, from my perspective, like IVF doesn't always work, right? It's like this incredible technology. Um, it's one of the reasons I have a complete family. Uh, it is literally absolutely amazing that we have this technology over the last 50 years, but it does not always work. And that's actually really shocking for people. And so, like you said, in the beginning of us chatting, that the more you know, the more humble you get. Like the more I know, I can have this absolutely gorgeous embryo, and we've used a technique in the lab to isolate sperm with the lowest DNA fragmentation. We've done everything that we can to choose the right protocol to get the most eggs, and my embryologists have like 20 years of experience, like helping to, make the lab environment incredible. But yet, still, sometimes people don't get pregnant, and it's really from my patients asking the question, what can I do? Like, what can I do at home? And this is not something I was taught in medical school or my fellowship at Stanford. I had one, really interesting lecture on BPA and egg quality, like as I finished, and
Wow.
hopefully it's getting better because I'm really old. So, this was a long time ago. But it's the curiosity from my patients and the incredible work that's out there. So I think about endocrine disruptors in our household items. I think about the chemicals that we're putting on our body, whether it is, laundry detergent, chemicals in fabrics that we're wearing, beauty products. Oh my gosh, especially women. I mean, on average, it's like a minimum 11 products that you put on your skin a day, and your skin is your largest organ. And we always sort of focus on what we're ingesting, but it's what we're picking up from our environment all over. And so when I'm talking to people about what they can do, I say, listen, let's focus on your overall health and well-being and things that you can add to your life that are healthy and things that you can kind of take out of your life that aren't as healthy. And we're still learning a lot. I think when you come on really strong, it's sort of like when people first learn about climate change, they kind of shut down, Darren. Like it's so overwhelming that you have to kind of teach and have a conversation and be a partner with your patient on this or whoever is curious about it, because we're really all in this together.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a matrix moment when you
Yes.
when it's and it comes by way of, like you said, it's slowly realizing, like, in my second book, Fatal Conveniences, that's a tough one. It's a
Mhm.
tough one to get your head around, but that came by way of 30 years when my father was my first teacher, and he
Wow.
was suffering from multiple chemical sensitivity, and I was at university and he was a professor. So he was like, educating me and creating VHS tapes, and I was like,
Wow.
what the hell's going on? You think it's in his head.
Yep.
So my first Matrix moment is my dad's crazy, but I knew he wasn't, but something, because he's my dad, and so he was
Yeah.
suffering. So
Mm.
so for me, my the Matrix was starting to wobble in the 90s. So when I see latest research around BPAs, BPHs, phthalates, fragrances, off-gassing of formaldehyde and bras and you name it, I'm like, yeah, that's right. But but
Yeah.
but to your point, the general population, that's a tricky one because it is alarming,
Yeah.
especially for women when, number one, they are the commanders in chief of the household at the
Yeah.
least,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so when you realize that there's all these things that are now leading you to this expression that you want to have in your life, and then it's like, wait a minute, all these things are not good for my overall health, and they may be actually contributing to this challenge of fertility. And the trick is, as you know, it's not acute. It's not like I put on a shirt and I'm infertile tomorrow. Like,
Yeah.
it is a really tricky, we were born into this
Hmm.
and it's around us and it's like, wow, how do you start grokking your head around that? And I guess maybe what are some what are some first steps from a
Sure.
lifestyle perspective you really say, hey, these
Yeah.
are kind of non-negotiable. You need to
Yeah.
really start in these areas first.
Yeah, I love it. And one of the things I really point out before I start getting into the details is two big things that the research really shows that it's people sort of at the highest levels of exposure that have the most input, like risk of miscarriage or poor success with IVF or poor sperm parameters. Because you can't eliminate exposure, but it's people with the high levels. And the
Mm,
second thing I show them and talk to them about is if you do make changes, you see a difference. Like you can
mm,
change, makeup that 12, 13-year-old girls are using and then check their urine, a month later. And the phthalate and paraben levels are dramatically lower. So that's
mm.
a positive thing that
Right.
it's just really thinking about the highest levels and getting out of that fourth quartile and realizing that your body actually is great at getting rid of a lot of these things. And so trying to lean into it in a positive way. And some really
Mm,
basic things is I just really try to get plastic out of the kitchen.
mhm.
Just really, and people are like, wait, what do you mean? Like, my mom always used, the plastic ware and things. I'm like, okay, but think about it. When you were storing that, pasta sauce that you had, that marinara, it's like it turned red, right? Yeah, everything's seeping into your food, just like your food is seeping into that plastic. So, glass or stainless steel instead of plastics.
Mm,
Thinking about your water bottle. I know you talk a lot about filtering water. That's kind of like next level. I'm sort of talking to my patients about like, let's get away from your plastic water bottle and switch it out with a glass or stainless steel. Do not heat food. So don't put food in plastic or in the takeout container and then put it into the microwave. Switch it into like a glass container or something that's microwave safe, but is not plastic. And so, really kind of basic things like that. And then I really do talk a lot about beauty products. Like, I have learned so much being a medical advisor on Beauty Counter. It's
mm,
a B corporation, really leader in not only making clean products, but leading legislation and sort of education on how to make it happen. And trying to fight against sort of the greenwashing that's going on right now in consumer goods. And so I don't tell people, oh my gosh, you have to go throw out all of your products. I just say when you finish a product, like your laundry detergent, like just look at it, think about it, see if there's something else. And at a bare minimum, use unfragranced products. Like
yeah.
fragrance is one of the worst things because, as you know, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners know, fragrance on an ingredient in a bottle is key for parabens, phthalates, a lot of endocrine disruptors that they can say is, proprietary and part of their secret sauce. And so they can just say fragrance and not really list what's going on. So, air fresheners, sprays that, make your house smell better, laundry detergent that's a mountain breeze. What is a mountain breeze supposed to smell like? Like, what is that? And so,
Right.
really basic things, plastic out of the kitchen, really rethink your products and try to decrease fragrances. That's what you can start with.
Yeah, and those are great because those are constant, right?
Hmm.
You can they're just constant, and that's the challenge is we keep reapplying, especially with the makeup and the lotions and the shampoos and the conditioners and the deodorants, and we just keep reapplying and reapplying. And like you said,
Yeah.
some of these parabens and phthalates, they have shelf lives in the body and or half lives, and so they can get through your body, and the body's great at getting rid of some of this stuff
Yep.
in 6 and 8 hours. But the problem is we reapply and reapply and reapply,
Yep.
and that's where these things start to really build up. Um, so yeah, all of those things are unfortunately just places where people really need to pay closer and closer attention to
Hmm.
and not be overwhelmed. It's kind of like it kind of is what it is.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this is the matrix of this situation, and there's a bunch of products that don't have your best interest. And we just have to do better because there's not some, master commander that has your best interest
Yeah.
and profits over this health and safety, unfortunately, kind of still reigns way too true.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think it's important too that like I don't want people to shut off listening to the conversation because they think to themselves, "Oh, well, I'm not planning to have kids, so I don't need to worry about this." Because it really impacts so much of our health. Incredible studies looking at women with really painful periods that are diagnosed with endometriosis and learning that endometriosis on a laboratory level, like actually looking at a cellular level, but also a symptomatic level from the patients that you're talking to, is absolutely inflamed with estrogen and estrogen-like chemicals. And that's exactly what BPA is. I mean, bisphenol A was designed as a pharmaceutical in the 1920s. It was used to be given to women to act like an estrogen to help them with a lot of perimenopausal symptoms and things like that. And it was only replaced with diethylstilbestrol, DES, because it was more powerful and acted more on the estrogen receptor. But DES, as you know, has been illegal in the United States since the 1970s because women who took it when they were pregnant had daughters that had more vaginal clear cell carcinoma, uterine malformations, and fertility issues. And so when I make that link between, hey, that BPA that's in that plastic bottle is actually an estrogen-like compound, and it's acting in your body like estrogen, and you can have less painful periods if you're getting plastic out of your kitchen. That's really important. PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, impacts 1 in 10 reproductive age women, irregular periods, acne, extra hair growth, difficulty losing weight, like so many ways it can present absolutely sensitive to a lot of these endocrine disruptors. So I do try to teach about it, not just about like, oh, it's only important for your eggs and sperm if you're trying to get healthy. It's not just fertility, it's for overall well-being.
Yeah, no, and the pituitary master gland is kind of regulating billions of processes, and if they're disrupted and co-opted by these chemical, especially the estrogen-like receptors, then it creates a cascade of effect. It's just, again, this fertility is kind of like it's signaling a really big issue. Yeah, and
Exactly.
and that's the first kind of step. We can do a lot, right? And I think
Yeah.
that's so much of your messaging is there's so much we can do. Um, and and when you do these studies, and that's the thing, making the invisible visible through the tests, and it happens quite fast. Like we can take on these chemicals quite quickly. Is that
Yeah.
what you find in your studies?
Yeah, and I also think it's important to realize it's transgenerational,
Mm.
so you can be impacted by what your mom had when you were, in utero or even your grandmother. Um, am I correct? Did you have Shauna Swan on to talk about Countdown, her book? And
Yeah.
so she's an incredible scientist, and I
Well,
actually,
she actually, I didn't have her on the podcast yet, but
okay.
but she we interviewed her and quoted her for my book. Yeah. So
Got it.
yeah,
Yeah.
she's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you should have her because she really started out by trying to prove that this theory that the sperm counts had gone down by 50% was wrong.
Mm.
So she was like, that sounds like way too much. I'm going to really challenge the World Health Organization. I just really don't believe that. And she took it to the lab. She, did, animal studies, cell studies, and then took it to people and realized, wow, actually they are right. And she really linked it to phthalates, which is this
Mhm.
endocrine disruptor that's found in a lot of everyday household products. And one fact that she shared with me when I had her on my podcast that I just thought it just really resonated with me. She said, Laura, um, Who do you think has more exposure? People that live in cities or people that live out in the country? And I totally got it wrong. Because, of course, I said cities. I'm thinking like car exhaust, like inside, not getting fresh air. She's like, nope, it's absolutely people who are working on the farm and out in, our, industry, but out in around all of the chemicals that are being used kind of out there. So
Wow.
just really an interesting story, excellent book, really focused on sperm and a lot of transgenerational impact of these chemicals on not only sperm counts, but also function of male uh, working parts. I'm like, I'm not sure what I should say on your podcast.
You can say whatever you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so just like there's so many different ways of looking at it, but I really do try to give a positive message and like, hey, this is really terrifying when you learn about it. It's not the only thing that you should focus on when you're thinking about your fertility, but small changes, make a really big difference. And I try to leave people with hope.
Do you feel like people on that note, if they haven't made any changes or they go to their regular doctor and all of a sudden they're on the IVF cha train straight away, do you feel like people are jumping into that too soon? What are the pros and cons of that? Because obviously it's like I've seen it from a distance. My father, he got remarried. My step brother and sister who are now 20, gosh, they're like 23. That
Yeah.
was full on. That was third round of IVF back in the
Oh my
day. And I was like,
gosh.
what is this? Like, I didn't even
Yes.
know what the hell was going on.
Yeah.
So obviously it's miraculous and it creates the opportunity for life when things are not working
Hmm.
and especially like you said, the aging. But there is pros and cons to this thing. So do you feel like people are jumping in too early and what are the challenges with that?
Oh my gosh, that is such a good question. And no matter how I answer this, I am going to get some feedback on my social media channels. I think IVF is an incredible technology. I used it to help myself complete my family. I always think of my grandmother growing up on a Kentucky farm, you know, trying for almost 20 years to have her family. So I'm here, but in, the 1920s and 30s, she finally had my dad when she was 37.
Wow.
And she tried everything. She went to New York to try to get treatment. She, went to, witch doctors or whatever you want to say. Like she did everything. And she finally had my dad. And whenever there was a new technology, she would cut out paper, cut out the newspaper and like send it to me. It's like, isn't this amazing? And kind of talk to me. She's like, wow, if this was available, maybe I could have had my kids sooner. So I think that story, is part of the reason that I do what I do. And so the fact that we have it and people can start their family sooner is wonderful. Um, you can use IVF for so many different amazing things like preventing genetic disease and decreasing the risk of miscarriage and fertility preservation in the setting of a cancer diagnosis. Like we can't just lump it all into only people who are infertile are using this technology. But I have seen over my 20 years that this current set of patients, there are a lot of people that are jumping to it really soon. Like, I haven't gotten pregnant in 3 months. I want to do IVF, and sometimes I'm like, yeah, we just live in a very like immediate gratification society. And I'm like, okay, yes, that is an option. But, have you thought about this or are you focused on this? And so I don't ever want to take away an opportunity from someone, but yeah, IVF is not easy. It's a lot of medications. It's an emotional challenge. It's incredible, but you know, I never want to say somebody jumps into it too soon, but I will say, I can say, 10, 15 years ago, I'd be like, hey guys, I really think we should do IVF and because it's been a year or two of trying the simple stuff. And now
Mhm.
patients are coming to me saying, I want to do this yesterday. I want a baby now. So that, it totally depends on the patient. It's a hard question to answer.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, everyone has their sovereignty to make choices for their bodies, for their family, for their life. and that's their choice. And
Hmm.
I think, I what I have seen from your work is like you try to educate and give it, and that's a responsible as a doctor, and that's a responsible thing to do, going, yeah, of course it's available, and here's a bunch of other stuff that is probably necessary to do anyway,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's
And
true.
and a little bit of a side note, I did a lot of research, worked with one of the top stem cell guys 20 years ago, and then I had Dr. Adil Khan on, and he's been doing incredible work around stem cells. And it without fail, if you prepare the body for the reception and the creation and proliferation of stem cells,
Mm.
it's infinitely better if you do basic things before you even get the proper stem cells. And I'm not going to get into, because not all stem cells are equal, and it's a much bigger conversation. However, it goes to show that there are things you can do to support the body, the common sense things. And I think I just want to emphasize, do not underestimate the power of these smaller, seemingly smaller
Yeah.
choices before a huge infiltration of these other means and modalities. You should anyway, because it's
Yeah.
good for you, you
Yeah.
know?
No,
And
I
that's
agree. I like, for example, I was taught in my training, if someone has PCOS and they're not having regular periods, they're not ovulating, um, but they do want to get pregnant, give them metformin. You know, metformin is a diabetes
yeah.
medication, an insulin sensitizer, and insulin is intimately involved in ovulation, and it does help maybe 5 to 10% of the patients you give it to. But there's beautiful studies out there that show that if people with PCOS do some sort of zone two exercise, like around, walking, moving their body at least 30 minutes, 3 to 4 times a week, that they'll actually start ovulating on their own as well. And
Mhm.
so when someone comes to me, I'm like, hey, let's talk about all of the things that might,
Yeah.
help you. And let's see what we could try first.
Yeah, I mean, just think of that, the power
Yeah.
of walking.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
go figure. I did a whole podcast on GLP-1 and everything else, and of course, everyone, again, it's the same thing. You want to jump on Ozempic, you want to jump on all these things. Well, it turns out that exercise and eating whole food and all these things turn on your GLP-1 receptor, and of course, it does the thing that you're trying to jump steps for and get
Yeah.
this, and that's to your point. I can imagine you have all these different people and personalities and situations, and you do your best to inform them,
Hmm.
and then it's also their choice.
Totally.
uh yeah, from a male perspective, um the motility is plummeting.
Hmm.
The sperm quality is falling off a cliff.
Hmm.
Men are jumping on, you know testosterone replacement therapy like crazy. It drives me crazy, because it's the same kind of, I'm going to call it, my words, pathology of
Hmm.
like, I'm not going to deal with maybe some foundational things. I'm just going to jump steps. And so, these things have consequences, especially
Yep.
when you're not taking care of your foundational stuff. And so, from a male perspective, I guess when a couple comes together, what's the plan?
Yeah.
Because how do you deal with, you got the male, and probably the male is mostly focused over here on the
Yeah.
female. Why isn't we're like,
Yeah.
how do you handle that couple kind of situation?
Oh, I think it's great. Well, first of all, we do encourage, if someone has a partner, that they attend all the appointments because they're absolutely a part of this equation. And then anytime someone is reluctant to give a semen analysis, I'm just like, listen, like you are half of the genetic equation. You cannot assume because you have no sexual dysfunction or feel like there's any issues with your performance that you actually have sperm. Like we have to see it and count it and kind of make sure. And so absolutely everybody gets tested. We don't just sort of own, and that, oh my gosh, that used to happen in my field, Darren. Like people would only test the female partner, do all of this treatment, and then maybe finally get to the point where they're doing an intrauterine insemination, like where you take a sample and place it into the uterine cavity, and they're like, oh, there's no sperm here, huh?
Oh,
So somebody been doing
jeez.
like treatment for a year. That kind of stuff used to happen. So that's really important that they're part of the conversation. They hear me when I talk about lifestyle optimization. Like I wish that I wish I could teach and talk to my patients all day, but the way I reconcile that is I have a YouTube channel and I'm like, go to my lifestyle playlist and like look at all the things that I talk about you can do to improve your fertility. And I really talk about habits too. I talk about vaping, I talk about marijuana, I talk about regular heavy alcohol use. And nobody wants to talk about these things because they feel great. They're part of our social fabric. But there's no question that they impact the function of sperm and egg quality. And then when someone says, well, but my friend, down the street has 5 kids and he smokes, more than I do. I said, well, that's your friend. You don't know how this impacts your genetics and the function of your sperm, so learning, teaching, and then we really are thinking about treatment options, but never in isolation, never like, oh, this is just the female's fault or just the male's fault, because that happens too.
Hmm.
Like guys get really isolated and feel shame when they feel like their partner's going through all this stuff just because they have a low sperm count or no sperm. And so it's really looking at both of them. They're in it together. They're both thinking about their lifestyle optimization. They're making decisions together. And then I really do emphasize like you've got to do both lifestyle optimization, thinking about the products that you're using in order to help these treatments work better for you.
Mhm.
That's the thing that you're kind of saying, like, just come in. Oh my gosh. And I have to say this really quick before I forget. Testosterone will decrease sperm count. It will make guys stop producing sperm. So when you say all these guys are taking testosterone so they feel better or their libido or they're building muscle, I'm like, well, I hope someone who's prescribing that to them says this is a birth control and I hope you're not trying to get pregnant, because I have had to figure that out in my practice time and time and time again. And sometimes it doesn't come back. A lot of times
Mhm.
it does when you stop it, but sometimes that sperm production does not come back. You got to be so careful with that.
And that's something that's just it's not talked about enough. And maybe those guys are, we hope, older, but I know guys in their 30s for
Oh, yeah,
God's sake. And
absolutely.
it's probably the mean is shifting younger and younger as we kind of, again, we're a weird society, right? And certainly in this Western
Yeah.
culture, because we have, listen, I have a lot of impatience in my own way, but there's something I'm just not gonna do. I'm just not gonna start injecting myself with chemicals. There's just and hormones. There's just nothing. I'm gonna exhaust every opportunity for me personally. I'm
Yeah.
gonna exhaust every opportunity of what my control of my internal life, my external life, what's coming in, what's being exposed. So if a couple comes to you, two scenarios. If a couple comes to you and says, "We're a couple, 100% natural, but we're having a hard time getting pregnant." Obviously, you're going to test the
Hmm.
man straight away. And so what's your approach if a couple's coming in?
Yeah.
I'm kind of assuming some that we've talked about already, but if
Yeah.
someone's coming in and say, "Hey, this is our approach. We want to do it naturally. Help us out."
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, testing. So semen analysis for the guy. For the woman, you think about anatomy, right? So is the uterus okay? Are there fibroids we need to focus on? Are there ovarian cysts that we need to figure out? Are the fallopian tubes open? So some people can have blocked fallopian tubes and have absolutely no symptoms whatsoever. And if the egg and sperm can't meet each other, they're not going to get pregnant. So you have to have the basics: anatomy, sperm, and you want to make sure that someone's ovulating. So someone has to have regular, predictable menstrual cycles. in order to be ovulating on a regular basis. So if someone says to me, I have no idea when my period comes, I can go, 3 to 6 months without a period, but I'm just not sure why I'm not getting pregnant. I'm like, wow, I can actually figure that out because you're not ovulating.
Right.
And, we don't need to jump to IVF right away. We can focus and figure out how to help you start ovulating on a regular basis and hopefully help it happen in a more, low tech way. So yeah, basics, eggs, sperm, anatomy. And then we do talk about, health, stress, what's going on in their life, what, medications they're taking. I think about their chronic health too, because
Mhm.
sometimes people have uncontrolled diabetes, and that's really throwing off their overall health and reproductive health. Some people have uncontrolled or out of whack thyroid function. And so I can really focus in on that. So sometimes I'm finding things to address. But if someone really has unexplained infertility, pretty healthy, ovulating regularly, great sperm count, anatomy is okay. It's one of the most frustrating, but also one of the most common diagnoses. And I say,
Mhm.
listen, at least you've had a checkup, and maybe you just keep trying for a while and come back and see me in 3 to 6 months, and we'll go from there. Or we could do fertility treatment. And I think about it as low tech treatment or IVF. So
Mhm.
low tech is more like medications to kind of help with the ovulation, doing ultrasounds in the middle of the cycle, and maybe an intrauterine insemination to wash and prep and kind of get the sperm into the reproductive tract closer to where it needs to be around ovulation. It sounds like a lot, but it's all low tech because at the end of the day, you're kind of just putting sperm in and hoping everything goes just fine. And then the alternative is really IVF, a lot more work, a lot more medication, a lot more appointments and planning, but a much higher chance of success in most situations because you're controlling more variables.
Mhm.
So in one cycle, you're getting like 12 to 15 eggs. That's like a year's worth of trying and, isolating embryos that have the highest chance of success. So kind of talking about all the options.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot, but which is not surprising. You're systemically looking at, from a car mechanic standpoint, you got to make sure that you have tires on the car, that you have gas and
Yeah,
like, yeah,
that's a great analogy, actually. I like that.
yeah. I mean, and it's also like, unfortunately, our medical model, many doctors just jump all those steps
Yeah.
because of probably way too many patients, way too much pressure, whatever
Yeah.
that is. Um, what do you think? What do you think about stress in this
Oh
whole
my gosh.
situation? Pre-stress and then the
Hmm.
stress to get pregnant. There's two different, obviously, situations. If the woman's stressed, if the man's stressed, that's going to throw off so much. And then what are some good approaches to get people to kind of mindfully calm down and
Yeah.
regulate? What are your thoughts?
I don't know, Darren. I'm stressed about answering this question. No, I talk about it every day, and it's sort of the chicken or the egg, right? It's
Right.
like not being able to get pregnant and start your family on your timeline is absolutely stressful. And
Mm,
so all of my patients are stressed. But is it the stress that led to that situation, or is it the situation that is then leading you to be stressed out? And kind of like endocrine disruptors to my patients, I'm like, you cannot eliminate all of the endocrine disruptors you're exposed to. You cannot eliminate stress, but you can work really, really hard on stress management so that the impact of it doesn't last as long. And I use this analogy a lot where I'm like, I've got two patients, they're at a bus stop. Both of them step into the street and the bus is coming and they both come out and they both almost get hit. The one who's worked really hard on stress management, and it's different for everyone, where it's mindfulness or daily exercise or reading or joy in some way, whatever it is, that person is going to recover and their cortisol levels are going to come back down and their whole body is going to reach homeostasis faster than the
mhm.
person that has never figured out what helps them feel better. And so you've got to figure out what that is. And I have so many resources for my patients because every person is different. So there's
Yeah.
yoga for fertility. There for my patients who have recurrent miscarriage, there's such things as miscarriage doulas that
Mm,
aren't mental health specialists. They aren't, but they are incredible people that can connect and talk to somebody because unless you've had a miscarriage and you've been there, sometimes you just really don't get it. And of course, one-on-one therapy is amazing, but that's really intimidating and sometimes costly. And people are like, I can't add like another visit. There's group classes. I mean, so many. This fertility community, Darren, is really amazing. There are group online classes for people struggling with every single aspect of it: male fertility, female infertility, secondary infertility. They've got a baby, but they can't add to their family. So just finding that right thing. You know, I am intimidated by meditation. I know you talk about it a lot. I am really good at mindfulness, but
Yeah.
I get nervous, like trying to quiet my mind. So mindfulness and journaling. And I live in Seattle, so I'm able to talk to my patients about just getting outdoors a lot and how
Mhm.
important that is. So I really do talk about it a lot. I bring it up at visits, like in different ways, like, you know, tell me what's going on in your life. How is work? How's life outside of family? Like, what makes you worry? And everybody's got something, you know?
100%. Well, it's like I've thought a lot about recently because the LA fires, and I had to evacuate, and I lost my home before. And there's a point to
Oh
this,
my gosh.
several points. That is, to your point, these groups and finding people. Like I reached out to a bunch of people who lost their homes currently because I lost my home. I know exactly what that's like, and
Oh,
there is something very powerful when you know that person is going through exactly what you've gone through. You lost everything. What do I do? And I think that in terms of community and not having women suffer themselves, they might be in a situation where the guy's not maybe very emotionally available. He doesn't understand that he's a part of it. So she's now, I can't give my family another baby. So you're siloed.
yep.
You're just now struggling. It's my fault. And the shame cycle is intense. And like I said, probably one of the most intense
Yeah.
situations for a woman, and for a family. And that kind of, at least having the awareness to reach out to others that have, there's probably online communities that people can have access to as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Resolve.org is an online place with a list of a lot of in-person and
Mhm.
online groups to support. Recurrent Pregnancy Loss Association has an online group. Return to Zero, excuse me, that's the movie. The Return to Hope, the same people that made the movie created this incredible resource for people with stillbirth and infant loss
Mhm.
and miscarriages. So, yes, there is an incredible community out there. And you know, I can help you find it because it's out there. But sometimes it's really hard, honestly. And if anybody out there is listening right now, sometimes it's really hard to take that first step. And that's
Mhm.
honestly one of the reasons that I have a podcast. So I
Mhm.
interview all these people that I think are incredible resources. And then I can say to my patients, hey, just go listen to this person talk. And if that resonates with you, then make an appointment.
Mhm.
So I think, that's another gift that you're giving too, as people want to learn about what you're sharing, Darren, how to, you know, live healthier and, that curiosity that you carry. I hope that just hearing that we're talking about this is helping some people.
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously outside of, I don't have children. I weirdly, it's a whole nother story, but I was so focused on other stuff that I was like, I'm now 54. I'm like, wow, I did approach why I didn't like think about it all that much in my life. So I've been able to rectify that, but I think the point is that I like, this is a vulnerable podcast. This is like, well, what the hell do I know other than, some lifestyle stuff? I know it's going to help, and but it's like, I know that many women, when I was writing my book, that they the male flaw is we're not as open, and we're not as curious, and we're not as receptive. That's just unfortunately the way it is. But
Hmm.
women are those gatekeepers.
Mhm.
We want to please them. So if they offer in the right in the right, not too confrontive to our egos, then maybe we can be receptive to them opening up uh, our world. I think some of the greatest women in my life have shown me the greatest things. I mean,
Hmm.
I wasn't even trying. I've surrounded my life with amazing women that are
Hmm.
on my team, and my ex-wife and my ex-girlfriends, for the most part, were good friends.
Hmm.
And so the value is really there. But this is such a important thing because I think that um you know I don't want to out her, but a person working for me went through this whole thing, and it was
Hmm.
so hard on
Yeah.
her, and it didn't work, the IVF, and she
Mm.
was fairly health, I wouldn't say fairly healthy because I don't know, but she takes care of herself. She's
Yeah.
aware. She's doing what she can coming into it. And then went through the whole IVF thing, and it didn't work, and it was devastating to
Yeah.
see. So when people go through all of that and they've tried IVF and they've seemed like they tried, what's the approach then?
Yeah.
What's the adjustment that they can make? Both, maybe they're still hopeful, maybe they have a lot of time, maybe they're younger still, and it's not necessarily, they're 40 years old.
Yep.
Maybe it's a variety of different things, but they're not done. They just need
Yeah.
to kind of grieve that process and then get back on the horse.
Hmm.
What's the approach
Yeah.
then
Oh my
for them?
gosh. I love that. That's an incredible question. I think one of the wonderful things about my practice or what I'm doing is I do get a lot of opportunities to check in with people, not just that first visit, but we'll try a few, low tech things and we'll have another visit and maybe we'll try IVF and we'll have another visit. And each time I'm always checking in on how they're doing, because you can absolutely keep going, and IVF or the pursuit of a child can absolutely take over your life. It can ruin you financially, it can ruin a marriage, it can ruin your self-worth, and I can't let that happen to my patients. So I'm constantly talking about like how are you doing? And yes, we can do another cycle, but like how are you doing physically? How are you doing emotionally? How are your relationships? And let's check in with that. And I often am bringing up alternative ways to build their family, whether it is egg donation, sperm donation, gestational carrier. Like sometimes people are really, focused on having it in their family in the way that they always envisioned. And sometimes we need to alter it to kind of figure out what is the real goal, how you have a child or if you have a family.
Mhm.
And I'm also very open about the beauty of being child free. I've had incredible guests on my podcast talking about you know, an amazing choice to stop treatment and to relearn who they are without it and how fulfilling their life can be and how they can still absolutely parent or mother or be a role model to their nieces and nephews or communities, around them. So I talk a lot about that. And then I also share with people just that IVF is not perfect, and that 1 in 5 couples that do IVF actually go on to have a child without intervention. I mean, you have to have, ovulation and sperm and
Mhm.
anatomy and stuff. Like you have to have all the parts. But people put so much weight into IVF. They hold it up on this pedestal. It's so expensive. It's the best technology we have. And if it doesn't work, then I'm not going to be a parent. And that's absolutely not true. It's one cycle with one set of eggs and one set of sperm. And so I try to bring that down a little bit
Mhm.
and just really kind of not hopefully have people lose themselves in the process and still come whole on the other end, whether it's with a child or not.
Yeah, it sounds like the way you're approaching just being a doctor is so many people can learn from.
Oh,
That's what, especially in this area, and it's a side comment, but I can't imagine as a, you spent so much of your life becoming a doctor and then the pressures of how the system is set up for you to practice, you actually have to push back against, I would imagine, to then create or recreate what you believe to be correct
Mm,
or right. And just the questions that you're asking and the podcasts that you're creating and the resources you're making available to people kind of speaks more to your true oath of
mm.
what you're doing and why you're doing it. And it's a breath of fresh air, honestly.
Oh,
Um,
gosh. Thank
I,
you.
but I just want to, I want to emphasize that because it should be the way the system is.
Hmm.
And I'm saying system because we know the problems of the system. The systems are pretty gnarly and not very human in a
Mm-mm.
certain sense.
Totally.
It's becomes more of product rather than the quality of those people. So have you like speaking a bit of like if I came to you, I'm like, of course I'm not a woman, but if I was a woman, I'd be like, my first, obviously this is an individual question, but I'm like, I don't take anything. Like
Yeah.
other than supplements and the light, and I've got hit with a bunch of stuff traveling all over the world, and I have a lot of trust in my body. So the last, and my mom was a nurse, like
Mm.
so she always kind of brought me up with fear, like, oh, you're allergic, oh, you're like poking and I'm like, ah, so I kind of thought, and of course I was 2 months premature. So my imprint,
Oh,
yeah, I was tiny, had
fascinating.
no contact with my mom for the first 3 weeks of my life, almost died.
Hmm.
So my imprint that I've had to overcome is I'm fragile, I'm weak, and I probably am not going to do well. So
Oh,
that's what spawned like the resurgence of like this is an amazing life. We've got a lot of options. I want to live a stronger, healthier life. And so therefore that's the impetus. So if I came to you, if I was a woman, I'd be like, nope, there's no way I'm doing IVF, but I'm 1,000,000% committed to having a child. What do
yeah.
we got? What
Oh,
would you do? How would we express? Is there acupuncture? Is there supplementation? Is there nutritionals? Is there therapy? I would be that person. I'm doing everything, all of it, 100%.
yeah.
How would you approach? I mean, it's kind of scary thinking me of as a woman, but um,
No, I get it. I get it. And I love it. And I want my patients to, you know, tell me what they're interested in. Like that's the first thing is that I open a consult with a lot of listening because the worst thing I could do is come on strong with IVF and spend half an hour talking about it. And then someone say, well, I would never do that, ethically, you know,
right,
needles, whatever.
right.
And so I would say, hey, listen, this is what I can offer. And let me tell you about alternatives that I can't actually provide for you, but like I can help connect you with people. That's just like the
Mhm.
resources. So what I could offer you is really good evaluation. You can take as many supplements as you want, but if your fallopian tubes are blocked, you're not going to get pregnant. So let's
Right,
like make sure the basics are there.
right.
And then I would say, sometimes what I could do is maybe just do a couple of cycles where we're just monitoring you with an ultrasound because you might not really be ovulating when you think you're ovulating. Your uterine lining might not be getting thick enough. There's something that we might pick up on just by watching you go through a cycle that you might not have known about. Like that's
Mhm.
something that's not giving a single medication or anything like that. I can give all the counseling about nutrition, exercise, eliminating, habits that aren't good for your body. I can talk about supplements. And then I will very often work with a fertility acupuncturist in town. I co-authored a book on how Eastern and Western
Mhm.
fertility treatment can actually be best for the patient if they work
Mhm.
together. And so I would just be super straightforward with like, hey, this is what I can offer you, and just be honest, like, hey, I'm a Western trained, Stanford MD. So I'm great at IVF for these interventions. And so I'm also not going to keep you in my practice forever if I'm not, you know, doing you a service. I'd rather you spend that time with an acupuncturist or a naturopath in town that is going to tweak things in a way that I'm just not practicing.
Right. Well, again, it speaks to your character of opening up your own curiosity of like, because I look at some of that stuff. I've gotten to be in far off places in the middle of a research lab in India
Mm.
where Ayurvedic practice has potentially been going on for 15,000 years, and you're just like going, "Oh my God, you can't even get your head around that sometimes." You're just going, "Holy shit, they know something." Right? So,
Absolutely.
you
Oh my
know,
gosh.
yeah,
Oh,
it's
I
pretty
got
pretty
a
amazing.
story for you. So, I mean, I was trained in very paternalistic North Carolina, but I did an externship in the University of California in San Francisco. It's where I ended up doing my residency.
Mm,
But that externship, I was actually working with Yeshi Dandan, who was the personal doctor of the Dalai Lama.
nice.
And it's the first time, and he was looking at stage 4 breast cancer patients. They were using Western medicine to sort of stage, the cancer. They'd offered them all the Western treatments and it just wasn't working anymore. So staged, and then he did what he would do in his practice. And so that's how I saw people like
Mm.
being diagnosed with like looking at their tongue and feeling their pulse. And I mean, I was like, oh my, I mean, I must have been 19 or 20 out of North Carolina, just totally mind blown. And I was like,
Yeah.
who is this guy? And he ended up, when they left Tibet, now all he does is treat breast cancer. But just that opening and then trying to go back to North Carolina, this is in, like the early 2000s and try to explain what my externship was. They were like,
Yeah.
you're
Uh,
ridiculous. Get out of here.
right.
So, yeah, I think we share that curiosity and humbleness as a physician, what I know and what I don't know, and how even if I don't know it, I can let you know. God, that sounded
Right.
really stupid and not well thought out, but just just being open and humble about what we know and we don't know. Like this comes up so much with my
Yeah.
patients with recurrent miscarriage, and just absolutely convinced that it's an immune issue and that their body is rejecting, uh,
Mm.
a perfect embryo. And so much of the research that's coming from my mentorship at Stanford, looking at whole genome sequencing of embryos that have miscarried and absolutely finding single gene mutations that are leading to miscarriage. Like this is going to break open miscarriage and finally release some of this shame that women have that it's their
Mm.
body rejecting the embryo. So just
Mm.
stay tuned for it.
Wow.
But just, those conversations and I'm like, listen, I I want to give you these really high dose steroids or, IVIG or intravenous interlipids, but there's some harm with it and it's just not a part of my practice. And, let's just really kind of talk about it. So a lot of this, what we know, what we don't know, still a lot to learn.
Yeah, man, there's so much. We're so tiny in this whole construction,
Yes.
you know.
Yes.
What do you think? Because I know you deal with this on a consistent basis, especially on social media and stuff. But any myth that you find that the biggest myths that keep around and keep repeating themselves around reproductive health,
Mm.
what are some of those things that you're just like, oh my God, I can't believe people are still talking about this in this way?
That you have to lift your hips up after. There we go. Like
Gravity. Come on, that makes
gravity.
sense.
No, there's great studies, and even after an embryo transfer, right, which is really high stakes. You've done all of this work and spent all this money in embryo transfer. Randomized controlled trials show that actually, if you do just get up right after, you don't lie down for 10 or 15 minutes after the embryo transfer, you actually have a higher success rate. So,
Wow.
yeah, yeah,
That's amazing. Why
it is
why is that, do you think? Is
right.
that some sort of innate peristalsis that's going on that I don't
That's a
know.
great question. My humble thought, and I can't prove it, but you need to have a full bladder to do an embryo transfer because it allows us to use an abdominal ultrasound to see through
Mm,
that bladder and get a window into the uterus to watch the embryo transfer go.
mm,
And so, at Stanford, 15 years ago, we used to have people lie flat for 30 minutes and get them like a bedpan because they were so uncomfortable with this full bladder.
Mm,
So my humble thought is you're just letting them get up and go to the bathroom and kind of just get on with their day,
mm.
not having them lie there and totally stress out about peeing the embryo out, which can't happen.
That's, oh my God. That's so funny.
So that's a
Uh,
good one.
that's a
That's
good one.
probably not what you were thinking about, but
It wasn't, but it was a good one.
um, let's see what other things. Well, I mean, there are a lot of people that think that testosterone will improve male fertility,
Mm,
and I'm
mm.
constantly re-educating on that, that it's actually it's being looked into as a male contraceptive because if your testicles are seeing testosterone from an exogenous source, they get lazy and so they don't make their own testosterone. And if they're not making their own testosterone, they're also not making their own sperm, so just really trying to teach that. Um,
We're gonna clip that one. Guys are gonna be
yes.
like, uh-oh.
Yes. Well,
It,
and
it,
there are doctors out there that give testosterone to men that are trying to get pregnant because they honestly think that they're helping. Like it's not just the people that are taking it that don't know. Sometimes it's the providers. It's
and that's a,
wild.
and they keep saying that, and they keep doing that, and they keep pushing this shit.
Yep.
And everything has a consequence when you do stuff
Yeah.
like that. And like I had a good friend who, he didn't say anything to me, and he probably would have in any other circumstance dealing with some sort of health something. And he didn't say anything. And I was like, I saw his body, and then all of a sudden I found out I was like, oh my God. And without a doubt, he was severely affected.
Hmm.
And he had to stop it all. I'm like, what are you doing, dude? Like,
Yeah.
come on. Like this is,
Yeah.
and that's if there's a phase I'm gonna get into is I want to create a really powerful plan for guys to work on these foundational things because man, I think jumping steps are just male and female. When you jump
Yeah.
steps without common sense stuff,
Yeah.
it's not a good plan.
I agree.
Um, hey, one last thing on if you could change like sex education and kind of
God.
get this going better, or I don't even know if it exists. I know we
I
had some
know.
weird ass sex education in school. Um, but how would you start that? What would you
Oh,
do?
absolutely. First of all, we need it because it is actually getting eliminated in a lot of school systems in the United States. We need more, not less. And what I would love to focus on is not fear-based approach to getting pregnant before you're ready or getting a, sexually transmitted infection or disease, when you're or all of these things. I would love for it to, I mean, I think those things are important because people should be aware that there are consequences of unprotected intercourse, like unwanted pregnancy or some diseases. But let's focus on what's normal. Like what's a normal period? Like
Uh,
women do not know what a normal cycle is like, or the fact that they're supposed to have a period about once a month, and how that's an incredible window into their overall function and health and homeostasis, right? Like when you stop having periods, your body is telling you something's going on.
yeah.
Um, yeah. And another thing is, as we're learning about the body, I would love for girls and boys to learn it together. Like,
Mm,
I understand maybe there's got to be some splitting of the rooms where so girls can ask questions that they only want to have other girls hear, but just at least the basics of the education. Like, guys need to understand the menstrual cycle too, and women, girls need to understand what their guys are going through. So more like normal physiology, what's normal, what's abnormal. Like talk about periods that leave you on the floor or inability to go to school are
mm,
not normal.
mm.
And there, so many women are carrying that around. It often travels in families. Like, oh yeah, my mom was like that, my sister was like that. That's just how periods are in our family. Nope, it's not okay.
Right.
So I want people to hear that or even hear about PCOS.
Mhm.
in high school. I don't know. That might be extreme, but a girl can dream, you know?
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think even the stigma around it, I think we're still so far away from kind of just treating people with some dignity around it. And
Yes.
imagine those kids, you're being surged with hormones at the time.
Yeah.
You like just talk about it and not make it so fearful, but at least educate so you because listen, we all know what happens, especially with teenagers. If you tell them not to do something and then you make it a little like fearful, what do you think they're gonna do?
I
And
know.
you know,
Totally.
and at the same time, you've got more testosterone than you can possibly imagine,
Yeah.
and for as a guy, and the females are just like all of a sudden they have breasts, and there's like all this stuff is going on, and we just kind of throw them to the wind, and
Yes.
it's just like, oh, they're kids, or they're like, and it's like as a culture.
Yeah.
I've been in cultures where, it's dangerous because they're so afraid of having sexual conversation at
Yeah.
all, and
Yeah.
it becomes dangerous
Yes.
because it's so stigmatized, and
Yeah.
then it blurts itself out, and people get in gnarly situations. I've seen it.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah.
yeah, it's so important to have these conversations, and and you have an amazing book,
Hmm.
Not Broken,
Thank you.
which I think everyone should maybe that's the criteria. Maybe just people just start using that as the syllabus
Yeah.
of educating themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Nobody reads anymore, Darren, so I'll just keep posting on YouTube.
It's so true. It's so true.
Yeah, no, it's good. I just so appreciate this opportunity and again, I just can't emphasize I appreciate what you're doing, your
Mm.
curiosity and sharing what you learn with others and you're on a journey and we're really lucky to be on it with you.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. I feel like I'm just getting going because I get interested in something else, and then I have this conversation with myself sometimes. I'm like, because I can stress myself out. I'm like, I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to create
Mm,
this, I got to create, and it's just like, okay, you're okay.
yeah,
You
I
know?
can definitely relate to that.
Yeah, there's so much you feel like you want to do, and like, and if you have any sense of contributing, it's in a good way, just rewarding,
Yeah.
so it's a big world,
Yeah.
and we're flying around, but yeah, I love the content. I love where can people find you and find out more information, and if they also want to get support with their own journey, where can people find you?
Oh, thanks. I would just start with my website. It's Dr. Lora Shahine, LoraShahine, because that has links to my books and my YouTube and my podcast and a lot of resources like we talked about.
Yeah,
So I
nice.
just would love to be a resource for anybody that is struggling to build their family or wants to learn more about their reproductive health. I might not have all the answers, but I certainly have a lot of questions and can help you connect with people that might be able to help you find those answers.
That's the key, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the
Mm-hmm.
key. A healthy source for people to find answers for themselves. That's the best. Well, thank you so much, and I'm so grateful. We're connected. Stay connected. Reach out if you need anything, and I will as well. And I'm grateful for this conversation.
Oh, me too. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.